1713. Republic of Venice. A wanted man is on the run. After committing a crime against the all-powerful Cardinal of Padua, a disgraced student escaped to the Papal States to hide. Caged and isolated, he had no choice but to pick up the bow. And as this bow continued to shape his destiny, an unusual stranger will arrive and guide him toward an enigmatic musical composition. A music so ethereal and so magnificent, it will outlive his name, but so destructive, it will carry a price to pay. This is the story of how an exiled man discovered a sound that doesn't exist, and knowing its heavy price, traded it to buy his freedom back. This is the story of Giuseppe Tartini. So, what is this non-existent sound that he discovered? And more importantly, how did this discovery change his life forever? To understand how a sound can shape a man's destiny, we have to go back. 1710. Padua, Republic of Venice. The police force of Padua is on the hunt. They were looking, not for a thief or murderer. They were looking for a man who had committed a grave sin, an unlawful act that struck at the very core of the Venetian social order. So, who exactly was this man on the run? His name was Giuseppe Tartini, an 18-year-old university student from a wealthy family in Peran. On paper, Tartini's life was already set in stone. His path was paved with gold and prestige as his family set him to become a Franciscan priest. But despite these multitude of privileges, he had other plans. Instead of following his father's wishes, he enrolled at the University of Padua to study law, and there spent most of his days not in prayer, but partying and fencing. His rebellious streak didn't just end there, and here lies the beginning of his greatest sin. He fell in love. Yes, in total secrecy, at the young age of 18, he married a fellow student named Elisabetta Missouri. You see, unlike Tartini's prestigious lineage, Elisabetta was his polar opposite. She came from a poor family, had multiple family members to support, and held zero social standing. But none of these were really the cause of his sin, because beside them, Elisabetta was a special person. She had a special relation with one very specific person. A person who holds a lot of power in the Venetian Republic. The Cardinal of Padua, Giorgio Cornaro. Now, during 1700s, while a cardinal's powers had been limited to the religious affairs of the state since the Venetian interdict in 1607, Giorgio Cornaro was an exception. You see, his family, the Cornaro family, was one of the original 12 founding families of the Republic of Venice. A bloodline that has lasted for almost 1,000 years. In other words, Cardinal Cornaro was not only an influential religious powerhouse, he was also a wealthy and political juggernaut. And this special relationship he had with Elisabetta. She was his protégé. In Venetian customs, a protégé relationship wasn't just a simple student-teacher mentorship. It was a form of sovereign agency, whereby the cardinal extends his grace to such protégé through financial and social support to advance their position in church hierarchy. And in exchange, the cardinal acquires near absolute authority over the protégé's personal rights, including the right to marry. Thus, by marrying Elisabetta without Cornaro's consent, Tartini had not only triggered the cardinal's personal ire, he had also committed the crime of raptus. A crime of abducting a person from someone who have authority over them. With just a single stroke of a pen, Tartini's extravagant life did a total 180. He wasn't a student anymore, he was a kidnapper and a wanted man in the eyes of the law. If arrested, he wouldn't just lose his freedom, he would lose his social standing, his future, and potentially his life. He knew he could not stay in Padua anymore. Disguised as a common pilgrim, he crossed the border into the Papal States. He thought he had found sanctuary. What he didn't realize, that in the silence that will follow, a hum from the void would whisper. A whisper that might lead him to his freedom, or to his ruin. Tartini went south and headed to the place where his original life was meant to live, the Basilica of St. Francis of Assisi. Inside these stone walls, not only is his identity unknown, his safety was also secured through the papal immunity, a jurisdictional shield against his warrant. Now, he might have temporarily escaped the claws of the cardinal, but this shelter won't feed him forever. To earn his keep, he decided to pick up the bow and pursue his childhood passion, the violin. As a child, Tartini had the opportunity to learn the instrument, but that basic level of knowledge was nowhere near enough to make a living. So, under the guidance of the monastery's chief organist, Bohuslav Matej-Czernohorsky, he began to continue his education. And as months passed by, he was surely and slowly becoming good. But not good enough. You see, Tartini wasn't a prodigy, nor had an innate talent for music. But he had two hidden advantages. He was a man of sheer effort, and a man trained in mathematics and physics. Thus, he began to view the violin not through the lens of art, but through the lens of acoustics. And using these advantages, he began to tirelessly practice and record the physical qualities of sound, logging in every detail he can find and applying them onto his compositions. Until one day, he heard something unusual. While playing two high-pitched notes, he heard a sound that shouldn't exist. A deep, resonant note was ringing out, despite him not producing it. He had discovered what we now call the combination tones. So, what is a combination tone? It is a sound perceived when two high-frequency sound waves enter the inner ear and overwhelms it. And as a result, the brain interprets the difference between these two frequencies and creates a new third note. Basically, a psychoacoustic hallucination trill, as if another person is playing the instrument. But for Tartini, understanding this phenomenon didn't make it easier to control. A year earlier, he had an encounter with a strange visitor, and using this exact very trill, played a music so melancholic and so ethereal, it took his breath away. He tried to mimic the composition of this stranger, and eventually, committing it in a paper. And using this unusual composition in his performance, the crowd began to grow. But as his listeners continued to multiply, his mask, as the mystery man of Assisi, began to slip off. Because inside his sea of listeners, a person from his past was quietly listening. And as soon as the music reached its peak, a sudden gust of wind caught the heavy velvet curtain. The wanted man of Padua, Giuseppe Tartini, was finally unmasked. A traveler from Padua recognized the face of the fugitive and immediately sent word back to the cardinal. Now, while the authorities in Padua were being alerted, Tartini did the only thing he could. He didn't run. He didn't stop. He kept playing. And as the music grows louder, the scene was a total paradox. Here was a man standing inside the Basilica of St. Francis, one of the holiest sites in Christendom. To the crowd, the music was ethereal and divine. But Tartini knew the truth. The source of this music wasn't a saint nor God. So, who was this strange visitor earlier that inspired him to compose this music? It was a creature from his dream, and that creature is none other than the devil himself. In the book of French astronomer Jérôme Lalande, he wrote, Tartini claimed that the devil himself had sat at the foot of his bed, took up the violin, and played a music. A sonata so wonderful and so beautiful, played with such great art and intelligence, as I had never even conceived in my boldest flights of fantasy. And thereby naming it Il Trillo del Diavolo, the Devil's Trill Sonata. And, just as its name imply, playing it has a price to pay. You see, to perform this composition, one's fingers have to maintain an unnatural high-pressure grip and extreme mechanical speed, which are rather difficult even for experienced violinists. And in our modern understanding, prolonged repetition at this level places significant strain on the fingers, which eventually could lead to focal dystonia, a rare neurological disorder causing involuntary muscle contractions, which create a clawed and disfigured-like hand appearance. But Tartini didn't stop. He continued moving forward. His reputation grew so massive that it eventually reached the Cardinal of Padua. And in a stunning and unexpected reversal, upon hearing of Tartini's transformation, his years of silent study, his newfound discipline, and the divine impact of his music, Cardinal Cornaro dropped the charge. His music had saved him. He was no longer a fugitive. Now, Tartini might have broken the cage of his past. But was the devilish key he used to break free really what he claimed it to be? After 5 years of exile, Tartini was finally reunited with his wife, Elisabetta, not as a criminal, but a well-respected violinist. In the years that followed, he exponentially kept improving until he was regarded as one of the greatest in all of Europe. But in 1740, the physical toll of his career finally came due. Tartini suffered a stroke that paralyzed his left hand, ending his professional career as a violinist for good. He didn't disappear, however. He pivoted. Forced to put down the bow, he devoted the rest of his life to the study of acoustics. He published works like the Trattato di Musica and De Principis dell'Armonia Musica, attempting to further understand the science of acoustics. Now, as to the Devil's Trill, what is its real history? Some historians point out that the technical complexity found in the Devil's Trill align more closely with the skills Tartini developed later in his life. So, we end up with two possible conclusions. Either it was a sly marketing ploy by Tartini to give the music a mysterious origin, or it is an actual gift from the Lord of the Darkness himself. Giuseppe Tartini lived until the age of 77, dying in 1770. He started as a wanted man and ended as an acoustic scientist. Whether the devil truly played for him in that stone cell, or it was simply the result of his relentless obsession to perfect his music, the result remains the same. He found a sound that shouldn't exist. We don't call it a miracle, nor we call it a curse. We call it the Tartini's tone. So, that is it, the mystery of the fugitive turned violinist. Stripped of his name, his fortune, and his love, he walked into a path of silence, defeated. And somewhere in that silence, he found a sound that doesn't exist. A sound that will fill in a masterful piece. A piece from which he will be reborn, and his legacy remembered. If you don't want to miss our next bizarre mystery, you can join us by hitting that button down below. In the meantime, feel free to check our dusty library, brimming with strange and unbelievable stories. And as always, stay curious.